One of the biggest questions since the beginning of One Piece has been who would be the total crew of the Straw Hats, and to this day there are many who think we are still going to get one more member. But the reason for this is a little confusing, and I'm going to explain to you why people think this, why there could be one more, and why that assumption might actually be wrong. At the beginning of One Piece, we are told by Luffy that he wants a strong crew, and that crew will help him get to the Grand Line and ultimately become king of the pirates. Now, we do know now that he has another goal entirely, but that's for a different video. So in this, why do people assume that we're going to get one more Straw Hat? Well, the answer kind of ties into that beginning, and then therefore the role all of the crew members fill. So primarily when we look at how the crew was assembled, they all fill very unique roles that are absolutely necessary on a ship. Zoro is the vice captain, Sanji is the cook, Nami is the navigator, and Frankie is the shipwright, Brook is the musician, and Chopper is the ship's doctor. These are all essential roles to the ship. And in truth, you probably wouldn't necessarily need a lot more to a ship, especially given how robust the combat maneuvers for them are. But there is, of course, two more members to the ship in total. There is Robin and there is Usopp. Now, you might make the case argument that Robin is there to really fulfill the function of being their historian and their translator, but that really only figures into the poneglyphs, and considering that's never ultimately been a very big goal for Luffy, it's not like he set out with the idea of recruiting her to begin with. At the same time, while, Usopp does fulfill a very important role of kind of being the general handyman as well as marksman of the team, his role was not a predefined one, and even his dream of everybody on the crew is the most vague, which is honestly a theory in and of itself, but like I said, that's also for a different video. In this case, though, I think Usopp presents the greatest reason as to why people think there will be another Straw Hat. Simply put, there doesn't have to be a specific reason for them to be there. I guess we could also look to somebody like Vivi, who was a temporary long-time member, or, Kinemon, or even Vivi. I mean, these are characters who we know they've spent a long time on the ship. There's a very good chance you would just count them as the crew anyway. So there's a pretty strong reason to just think that these characters would be Straw Hats, and there's no specific reason it has to be 10. But in terms of actually joining the crew, the last one that we got was Jinbe, and Jinbe also happens to fulfill a very important role, helmsman. They could arguably have gotten by without helmsman, but it is still an important role on most nautical sailing vessels, and especially the way Jinbe does it. So when people look at why you would need a 10th member, people would, very much argue that in the case of Usopp and Robin, the crew member does not have to have an assigned role, and even if they don't, they can become a perfectly assigned role like Jinbe for helmsman. And the biggest contributing factor to this, in my opinion, of why people think there will be a 10th, is Luffy's opening words. Luffy's words upon setting out into the East Blue says, "I need a strong crew, 10 should about do it." Now, the really funny thing about English as a language, and it's so hard to tell, especially when it's being translated back and forth from Japanese, is the nature of possessive pronouns and the possession of language. For example, usually when you say, he hit his hand, that would mean that the person hit their own hand. It could, in a context of two people though, also mean that somebody hit somebody else's hand. This is one of those lovely little things that we get in English. Why would I bring English homework into a discussion about One Piece? Because it's actually important. Listen, the idea here is that Luffy says he needs a crew of 10. Does that include him? The greatest case argument is that most people would not assume the captain is part of the crew, and on most crews that would be true. You look at any crew like Eustace Kid's crew, or you look at a lot of the older crews like Kaido and Big Mom's crew. The captain almost sits apart from their crew. They are a part of them, but they're not held within the same general rank. The thing that works against One Piece fans in this particular instance is that Luffy doesn't really see the distinguishment. He doesn't see himself as better than the rest of the crew, and despite the fact some crew members do hold him in that upright regard, in particular Zoro, he doesn't. So it's a bit difficult to tell in his mind, when he said 10, did he mean a crew of 10 under him, or a crew of 10 including him? Over under there's probably a more than likely large chance that he meant including him. In which case, the entire crew has hit its total number of 10. You know, we have everybody, we have all the slots filled, the Straw Hats aren't going to need to be any bigger because every other role from now on is going to arguably be filled by the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. You know, these will just be allies who come to their aid and will be with them in the final battle, which I will be fine with. To be honest, there's a very large case argument to be made that by the time this is over, we're kind of approaching the end. Would the crew even necessarily need to stay together once they've hit the One Piece? Because, I mean, let's be honest, once they hit the One Piece, I'm assuming this series is going to launch right into its, like, final or near final battle. Assuming we're not going to get any more time skips, which I don't think we should, but they're, you know, Oda's kind of crazy and he's been doing this for 25 years. Because of that, it's very likely to see that the Going Merry from this point onwards, and not the Going Merry of the Thousand Sunny, really could just end up carrying them all to their final destinations after this. If that were to be true, there's not really any reason for a 10th member, because once Luffy's dream is achieved, everybody else is pretty much going to hit theirs in quick succession after, and the story will come to a close. But why don't you let me know in the comments wherever you think we're actually going to get a 10th member, or if all the people who we already consider Straw Hats or hope will simply become members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet.